Great pleasure to welcome one of our very esteemed guests. She has taken on a role that is very influential, a role which affects many of us as South African citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, can we please put our hands together and apart and together and apart and together for the Auditor General of South Africa, Tsakani Maluleke. Over to you.
Okay, first switch it on. Okay, I'm really hoping that I can add value to your dialogue this afternoon. I think of it as one dialogue with just a few different chapters. I want to also use this session as a bit of a dialogue. It's after lunch, and I doubt that it's going to go very well for me if you guys are just trying to listen. So maybe let's start here. Okay, I'll tell you what I want to talk about. I want to introduce you a little bit to the AGSA, and I want to introduce you a little bit to work in the public sector, right? And we'll chat about that. I think as Ria says, the public sector touches all of us in some way, shape or form. And of course, the work of the AG touches all of you and all of us in some way, shape or form. Let me just check. Who's heard of the Auditor General of South Africa? Okay. Do you want to tell me what they do? What do we do? Okay, all right. Who wants to tell me? Okay, go ahead.
I know that you guys keep the government, public sector funds in check.
Yeah.
It's like managing the things going according to
there you are. Okay, I think that's the right answer. Anyone else want to add to it? We're constantly
downgrading.
Well, actually, we don't downgrade them. We give information to the people who then decide to downgrade them. And I think that's important because we don't actually run municipalities. We don't vote for people to run municipalities. We don't hire or fire people who run municipalities. We don't even rate their performance. All we do is we say whether or not what they say is true. That's it. I mean, it's as simple as that. All we say is the report that they're telling you about what they did, is it true or not? And you can trust us because we're nice people. No, I'm joking. You can trust us because we are independent of them. We're not the people who downgrade. We're not the people that work for them. We're only accountable to citizens at the end of the day, right? So you can trust us. We're independent. You can trust us because we're technical people. The work that we do is technically informed. You can trust us because we have standards to which we adhere, which help us ensure that the work we give you is of good quality so you can rely on what we tell you. It's credible. You can trust us because we're ethical people. And again, that's very important. Otherwise, why trust us? So we're in the business of telling you whether you can rely on information, and you have to trust us to rely on that information. Does that make sense? Okay. So now, would you ever work for the AGSA? I mean, I ask in good, thank you. I ask in good faith because I'm not working alone. You see, at the end of the day, there are some people who are with me from my team who are going to be able to take CVs and invite you. No, I'm not saying Nazi Spani. I'm just saying that they'll be willing to consider inviting you to be considered, right? I want to also check, would anybody work for government? Yes. Okay, all right. That's wonderful. You know, so often I hear people say things like, I would never work for public sector. So I'm glad I'm in a room where people think they would work for government, right? Anyone here who's like, not for me? Okay, do you want to say why? It's okay, there's no right or wrong answer.
Sure. I think the inefficiencies that we see on a day-to-day, it's kind of hard to imagine putting myself in a position where there's no authority or there's no accountability.
I like that because You're telling us something that worries you as a young person who wants to build a career and wants to actually contribute. And you're also telling us something about what you experience as a citizen. Okay, so, which countries do you guys envy when you look across the world? Which countries? Singapore. Ah, I love it. Which other country? Which other country? Switzerland. There you go. Which other country?
Canada.
Canada. Which other country? Australia. Okay. I find it interesting that the loudest and the first answer was Singapore. Can I tell you a little bit about Singapore? The very best of their people, the most talented of people in Singapore work not in private sector, not in banking, not in insurance. Where do they work? Public sector. As it should be. As it should be. Because the only way we're going to shift what you're worried about in terms of how government runs is if the very best amongst us actually choose to work in the public sector rather than to be like, I mean. Yeah, well, because somebody's got to do the work, and you better make sure it's the right people doing that work, right? Okay, no, I think it gives me a sense of who's in the room and how you see the world. I think it should make our conversation quite interesting. Okay, so as I said to you, I'm going to introduce you a little bit to the AGSA. I also want to introduce you a little bit to government, just to give a context to the work we do. And then we'll have a dialogue. I want to just also make sure that I give you a chance to ask me whatever questions you have on your mind. Nothing's off the table. I don't think we have opportunities like this very often to talk as like-minded people who care about South Africa, who are vested in South Africa. And I just love talking to people younger than I, and I'm loving the dynamism in this room already. So I'll make sure we have enough time for a dialogue. Okay, so let's talk about the AGSA. We are founded on the basis of the Constitution. And maybe just to contextualize it, you guys all voted in the elections. Yes. And now we chose our public representatives, and now we're waiting for a government to be appointed, right? And to be set up. And that government, their job is going to be to deliver services to you and I. Whether it's health, whether it's schooling, whether it's economic development, whether it's roads, water, sanitation, electricity. We can argue about whether or not they do it well, but the point is that's what they're supposed to do, right? And what do they do? They do it for you and I, on behalf of you and I, because you and I are the ones who elected them, right? And do you know what resources they use to do that work? Yours and my money, right? You all pay taxes, right? You might not think that you pay much tax, but actually you do. Sometimes we only look at the deduction on our payslip, but actually if you think about it, you're paying tax all the time, right? Every little thing you buy, even every liter of fuel you buy has a tax in there, right? And one day I'll tell you a bit more about that particular tax. Okay, now government delivers to us, for us, and on our behalf, right? So because they're not acting for themselves, those people that worry you on their inefficiencies, because they're not acting for themselves, they've got to be able to come back and say, what did they do with our money? They've got to show us how they use that money on our behalf for our benefit, right? So it's important that whatever they tell us about what they've done, somebody can tell us if we can rely on what they tell us, right? That's what the Office of the AG does, right? So it's important, therefore, that government be transparent about what they've done with our resources, right? And it's important that they be accountable. And it's no accident that our Constitution, which is one of the best rated in the world, specifies these key principles about transparency and accountability in many areas within the Constitution. And then the Constitution sets up the AGSA, the Auditor General South Africa, so that it can audit and report on how government spends money. And guess what? You know who's ever heard of these public sector auditors, like private sector? Deloitte, PwC, then? And then they'll audit things like, okay, I'm not going to say Steinhoff, I will say other All right, okay, that's enough mischief, aging. They do. I was at Deloitte for a while, so I'm not throwing shade. They audit private sector companies, and the thing that they do is they'll say financials can be relied upon. Similar role, but what they talk about is the financial statements. At the Office of the AG, we go further. We look at financial statements, and we say whether you can rely on them or not. We look at performance information, which is the service delivery report. We say whether or not you can rely on it. And then we tell you if government has complied with its own laws and regulations on financial management. That mandate, which is specified in the Constitution, informed by what we've called the Public Audit Act, which is the enabling act of the office, sets out this mandate. And we have the job of auditing every single public institution in the country. And we've got to look at them every single year and talk about these three things. And we add a fourth, and we say whether or not the internal controls are sound. And we add a fifth, which says whether or not there are material irregularities, which is the new powers we have. Now this mandate, if you look at it, it's quite expansive. Yeah? Because not only are you looking at financial statements, you're looking at other things. And you've got to assess on other things. So then maybe sometimes people then use the information to downgrade, which we don't do ourselves. But it's a suite of information. I think that's quite valuable, don't you agree? Other AGs across the world envy us. Because not every AG has a mandate like we have. It is of the very best in the world. And so when you think about the things we struggle about in South Africa, the things we worry about, the things we envy elsewhere, I want you to remember this. We have a solid constitution. We have solid institutions that have been set up by the Constitution. Our job, mine and yours, and that of your children, must be about protecting those things. Because if you go backwards, you're going to get worse than where we are now. We'll come back to that point. Remember it. I'm happy for you to ask me what it is I meant by it. I want to just make sure that I've touched on everything here. So the AGSA, which as I said is set up in terms of the Constitution, is basically the supreme audit institution in the country. So I'll give you an example. When the auditors of Denel, we used to have a firm of auditors auditing Denel, and they couldn't do it anymore. Guess who has to step in quickly? The auditor of last resort, the supreme audit institution, the AGSA. We have the constitutional mandate. We might say, we don't have the capacity to audit ESCOM, which is what we've said. We'd like Deloitte to do it or someone else to do it, but we'll check that they're doing the right thing. But the responsibility still stays with us. We may say, sure, we've got like 3,900 people that work with us and over 1,000 chartered accountants that work with us. Yes, you heard correctly. We might not have the ability to audit everyone at the same time, right? Because government timeframes are quite tight. So then we'll say, well, we'll outsource a bit of this work, but we still remain responsible because we are the supreme audit institution. Now, supreme audit institutions exist all over the world. AGs exist all over the world. And their job is to support their countries around accountability and transparency. And they've all set for themselves a particular goal to say, you know what? It's good to get the debits and credits right, to have an audit file that looks good, to meet all the international standards. It's good to brag about that. It's good to say, I've done my job. I've audited, I've reported, I'm done. But it's absolutely crucial that we worry about the impact of the work that we do. So all of us across the world are seized with this question. How do we make more impact from the work we do? We still have to make sure that the work we do is of good quality. We still have to make sure that we fulfill our responsibilities of auditing everyone within the right timelines. But how do we make sure that we use our mandate to really drive impact? I'm sure you're wondering, how are you going to drive impact if you don't run government, right? So we've then said, no. You see, here's the trick. If you look at the work we do, I want to show you something quickly. If you look at the work we do, actually, because we can audit everyone every single year, because we can reach everyone, we can meet with them all of the time, we can actually shift how they think about their work, change their attitude, change their behavior. We've said, no, man, it doesn't help us just to go and say, okay, you got irregular expenditure, and then we table the report, and then the headlines scream, and then the next day one forgets about it and carries on, Soma, until next year. Right? And then all of you guys say, every time we hear the AG I'm sure Libona is fruitless and wasteful expenditure because every time they audit, they tell us the same thing. Some people will say, hey, gee, I'm sure you just cut and paste your reports and change and you just change the dates. But here's the thing. I happen to work with some incredible young people. 68% of our staff are young people under 35. So energetic, talented people who want to do more. They're like, no, this is not satisfactory. We can't be associated with things that don't work because we're part of the public sector. We also can't be associated with things people see no value in. So what is the impact? So we've gone and set for ourselves a most ambitious strategy. We've said, you know what? Using all of our capabilities, there's a reason why in South Africa you have an AGSA that has the best audit mandate in the world. In fact, the World Bank rated us. They said out of 156 countries that they rated, we were one of 2 that met full criteria for independence. Right? So when I said to you, remember the things that are good about our country, remember to treasure them, that's one of the tidbits I want you to take away with you. So we said to ourselves, no man, we have all this credibility. We have all of this capability. We have all of this space and access to do exactly the work we're supposed to do every single year. What is it all for? How can we drive impact and relevance? So we said, no man, if you look at different institutions, so many of them will brag and say, I have a clean audit, ne? Mm-hmm. Ne? And then you guys say, but where's service delivery? Ne? And then too many of them also will have really bad audits. Do you know what's the worst audit outcome you can have? A disclaimer of audit opinion. You're wondering what's that? Okay, let me explain. The thing is, it's important to explain this because not everyone lives it, right? So, when an auditor comes to check your books and they go and you give them a report and then the AG or the auditor, any auditor will go through the information you have, they check it against the evidence you have, right? They go and ask you, give us the invoices to back this up, give us, At the end of the day, the auditor then says, in my opinion, this information is correct. Or they'll say, in my opinion, this information is correct except for these little parts. They might say, I'm not happy that the number for debtors is correct, but the rest of the financial statements are correct. That's a qualified opinion, right? It's generally fine, but if they say it's correct, it's unqualified. The numbers are fine. If they say, maybe not. The very worst, or then the next worst one is, they'll say, I've done my best, I don't agree with these numbers. Then the very worst you can get, they say, Bona, I've done my best, I can tell you nothing. I'm disclaiming my audit report, audit opinion. I'm disclaiming it. I don't, like they say, I've spent the last 2.5 months looking at these books. I've put my best people on the job. That's a disclaimer, okay? That's what a disclaimer is. I have a young professional here who's a professional auditor. How do you explain a disclaimer? Is that correct?
Exactly how you just I have nothing to say.
Yeah.
And in the event that I books me in to say that.
Shambles. Shambles. They just can't back up what they're saying. They don't have the records. So, not too often, but...
What is not?
Okay, I'm going to explain. I think let's accept this. Wherever it happens, you and I must worry. Because a public sector, you see, so this is how I used to explain it. I said, look, you see, if somebody gets a disclaimer, it's like they've given a report, they say, okay, you gave us 100 million, okay, maybe like 80 million rand, right? And at the end of the day, we went and bought a few things, but we can't back it up. Because the AG says, nah. So what it means is that you don't have the slips, you don't have the records, you can't show what you, but the payment, the money's gone, it's not there. So it's kind of like this. You see, if, and often it's men, so I'm hoping the young men will never do this in their lives. So often it's a man who is kind of irresponsible in the family, and then they get their paycheck at the end of the month, and then they go like a weekend like this, ne? And then they go. And then they come back on Monday night, Monday afternoon. And then the wife says, how? Where's the paycheck? And then he goes, and she's like, but what do you mean? Yeah? Okay, maybe whatever he did, I don't know. There's a place called Konka. People say, I don't know. But here's the thing. The money is not there and he can't tell you what he did with it. So if it's a family, they can work it out. Maybe the guy's got a gambling problem. They get him help. They go and talk to the school principal nicely. They get some money to pay or they get an extension of the school fees. They talk to the bankers nicely. They extend their bond repayments. They can kind of recover as a family. Ne? And then from henceforth, they agree the money comes straight to her. And then life goes on. They can resolve it. But here's the difference. A public institution, that's not even their money. It's public funds. And the answer you're getting is, that's a disclaimer. Okay. How often? So last year we had 22 municipalities with disclaimers. The year before, 28. This year we've counted 12. There are a few more that might end up, but it's coming out of 257 municipalities. So it's still too high, but at least it's coming down. Yeah, we should never tolerate it. It should never have been tolerated to begin with, because if you follow the description, because the thing is, if you say it technically, it's easy to stomach because it sounds like a technical thing amongst technical auditors, né? But if you describe it for what it actually is, okay. So, yeah, you distracted me a little bit with the disclaimer. I'm passionate about it, clearly, because we gotta root it out, because it says the most unflattering things about the people who are running that municipality, their political leadership, everyone else who has responsibilities to oversee them, and it even says the most unflattering things about you and I as the voters, about what it is we are tolerating. So that's why I think we got to find a way to get out of the space.
Sorry, just to ask, do you find that it's the same municipalities that are repeat offenders, if I could call them that? So that means that even with the continuation of the auditor saying we don't really see what you guys are doing, it's perpetuated and that goes on?
Yeah, so the biggest worry we've had is that you see it can happen in 1 year, and you lose your records in a fire or a flood. It can happen once, you know. Mara, if you're a disclaimer for 5 years continuously, you know, there should be repercussions. They're not enough. And I think that's another reason why we've all got to worry about impact. So where I was going with this was to say to you, there are far too many institutions in the public sector that get away with you and me as citizens who think audit outcomes are a technical issue. And I hope that now that I've explained what a disclaimer actually is, you see it from what it is, right? So a disclaimer audit opinion, people used to say, no man, you see, don't worry about a disclaimer, it's a technical issue. The AG is a very difficult process. Tina, we're worried about service delivery. So we said, oh really? Okay. We went to look at service delivery. Because remember, our job is also to verify if information on performance information is correct, right? So we were able to show in no uncertain terms that there is a direct correlation between dysfunction and a disclaimer. The ones with the disclaimer, okay, let me call them out. Madibeng, Maludia Puvong. Let me think of another one. Mogala Kwena. Okay, they improved to adverse. So you know the ones I'm talking about. So you can see the picture, right? Okay. So we were able to go and look at wastewater treatment plants. They were just in a state of dysfunction. They were not being maintained, and that's why you have effluent running into the rivers, effluent running down the road, right? Which causes harm to people, causes harm to the environment. So we're able to link the work we do to the lived experiences of citizens. And that's why we did this work, to say we've got to give insight that demystifies these technical terms. Everyone must understand what a disclaimer actually is. And everyone must understand the link between the audit outcome and their lived experience. If you ask yourself why the people in Hammanskraal didn't have proper water and some ended up dying of cholera, well, if you look at the audit report, you can see the link. We kept raising matters around irregular expenditure, matters around non-maintenance of key infrastructure, specifically that plant. So what we're able to do is not to raise issues so that we can stand on podium and criticize, but we can raise issues and give people the opportunity to fix them. Some of the things we're able to raise, even on clean audits, is to say, you know what, you're doing very well because your financials are great, your performance information is fine, you comply with the rule of law, but guess what? You could improve if you fixed these things, if you shifted your investment towards these communities. And that's going to now start improving the lived experience of people in the informal settlements, for example, which might have been ignored before. So that's what we've done. We've said, given what we know, the fact that we audit everyone everywhere, all over the country, every single year, we can meet with all of them and we can report publicly. We can tell the world about what's happening with disclaimers. We can tell the world about, you know, this thing called unqualified audit outcome. Ne? And everyone says they're very happy. Now, I'm sure you've seen them. They'll make T-shirts, they'll celebrate, they'll say no, and then they'll even tell you, we've had an unqualified audit for many years, leave us alone. Now, I'm sure you've heard it, no? Okay, so often, an audit that's unqualified, it means their financials are right. So their debits and credits are fine. And you expect that, come on, right? So often, they get that done, but they don't worry enough about performance information, which means they're not being transparent on what they've spent the money on. You don't know if they've delivered services to anyone. They also don't comply with the rule of law. So non-compliance are things like when they go and issue a tender without following proper processes. What does that do? They end up appointing the wrong supplier who overcharges them and doesn't deliver. Then they have to go and find another one who actually do the job and then be paid twice, right? Which means they've been inefficient. The debits and credits will be right, but they'll be inefficient. And that's why they'll get an unqualified with findings. So again, you guys, I want you to look more carefully, listen more carefully. The next time someone says, I have an unqualified audit report, you say, yes, very good, that's a bare minimum. Can we talk about when you're getting a clean audit? And can we talk about how you link that to you delivering on your mandate? Tell me how it is you're performing on your mandate, because it doesn't help me, you must say to them, it doesn't help me, HOD responsible for COCTA, which is the department responsible for supervising, monitoring, and supporting municipalities, right? It doesn't help anyone if you have a clean audit and we must all, and yet you're not delivering. Let's figure out what it is you're doing with your mandate. So that's what we've done. So that's why many of our reports are looking and sounding differently, because we've taken the view that we must drive impact. That's basically the main story I wanted to tell you. I want to locate a little bit about about government, right? So the public sector, in its breadth, you'll know that you've got municipalities, national departments, provincial departments, you've got state-owned entities, some small, some large. The AGSA audits all of those. We might not audit ESCOM, but we oversee the audit. We audit Transnet, we audit all of them, right? SAA, yes, it's still there. We audit Denel. And I think that's important to say, right? Because I think the doom gets into our heads. The headlines get into our heads and we forget the really good things that are happening in the background. We audit all of the metros, etc. It's about 1,000 audits that we do every single year. I wanted to also highlight the thing about the independence, but we dealt with it when I was saying, why must you trust us? Because we're independent and we are of the best in the world around that. Government accounts for 2.4 trillion rand of expenditure. That's for the 2025 financial year, right? That makes up 32% of the GDP of the country. Now, if all of us realize the significance of government and the need to make sure every public institution that benefits from that 2.4 trillion rand is doing what they're supposed to do with it. If all of us worry about that, I think we have a much better functioning country. Mm-hmm.
Since you're speaking about GDP now, the percentage of GDP, and we spoke about Singapore, I wanted to ask you, unlike Singapore, do you think that we are unable to be as disruptive towards consequences and accountability to our leaders? Like we spoke now about disclaimer audits to the municipalities and government institution due to the economic stimulation that the GDP that you're speaking about requires.
Maybe repeat the question. Do I think we are?
So when we speak about GDP,
Yeah.
we are speaking about economic stimulation,
Yeah.
right? The movement of money, the movement of transactions, if you go to audit. So what I'm saying is, unlike Singapore, where the country has zero corruption or zero tolerance to the corruption, and in South Africa, I can't even get a number at this point because the corruption is at high level. You know, you're speaking of 28%, or was it 28 municipalities?
28 out of 257.
Yeah, you see, that's a big number. So do you then think that due to the economic stimulation that is required by GDP, right, because GDP creates employment,
Yeah.
yeah, it creates okay. Do you get the...
Yeah, I get you.
Okay.
I mean, so that's the point I'm making, that the significance of the public sector in yours and my life, right? Many people in Johannesburg don't have water this week, right? 2 weeks. We've had a reprieve from load shedding, thankfully, but 2023 and 2022 were hard. And many of us are still anxious about how we'll see through the winter. We've had many more people lose their jobs. We've had, because of a lack of economic growth and a lack of economic activity that supports the creation of jobs, right? We've got farmers in the Western Cape who say, we've had a good crop in 2023, they said, but our stuff is sitting in the port. It can't leave our shores. It can't reach our export markets. We've done everything right. And even the gods smiled at us. We had good rain and our stuff is there, but it's stuck at the port, which is supposed to then be exported and deliver economic returns into the country, right? And support confidence so that next year as a farmer I can plant again. So for me, more than just the term corruption, I kind of see slightly differently to say, can we get every single public institution doing their job? Because you see, if you've got Transnet's ports operating properly, that bounty from the farmers of the Western Cape reaches its markets. Because here's the thing, if you missed that market last year, somebody else will close the gap next year, right? And the farmer here will lose confidence and probably not plant, and you've got a whole lot of farm workers that are going to lose their jobs. Similarly, if you are a municipality and you get a grant from the local from national government to go and build roads, or to build a bridge, or whatever, or build houses, right? And all of these things are important for economic growth, right? Because you drive stimulus by the infrastructure spend, because somebody's being employed to build this thing and somebody's being employed to monitor it, and then somebody can actually use it, right? And you and I know the moment you actually have a house as a family, you live better, your prospects of being able to use that house to leverage for economic development, or even just something as basic as academic studies, that improves over generations, right? Now, if you fail to do it and the money is gone, or the money goes back to the fiscus because you failed to spend it, then you've missed the opportunity. So I know that we all should worry about corruption, and I'm not saying that we mustn't. Please don't get me wrong. I believe that we've got to be preoccupied with performance, because out of that, that's how you're going to push back on corruption. We've got to be able to say, you were supposed to build 10,000 houses last year. We want to see them. And we want to see good quality houses that are not going to collapse the next time we have rains, right? And if you don't do it, we're going to hold you accountable. That must be our conversation. We must be able to say, dear Rand Water, can you explain to us, how are we here? Why are you only repairing and maintaining things now, right? Okay, now that you're doing it, make sure you're doing it properly, because we don't want to be here again next year. You and I must be able to say to COJ, for heaven's sake, why is our suburb without electricity when no one else is suffering load shedding? Why is your distribution network for electricity a problem? Where did the money go? We must be able to say that. It's easy to worry about corruption and this tender and that tender, and these things are important. Our view, as the AGSA, is that if you get institutions to actually perform on their mandate and you hold them accountable for that, that's how you're going to push back on corruption. And that's how you're going to have the type of confidence that is so crucial among citizens. Because more than anything, you and I want to believe that the money we pay as taxes is being used for our benefit by the people who are doing it on our behalf. That's the issue, right? So, yeah, I hope I've answered your question. Okay, there's one at the back. Go ahead, put.
Yes, I think I just want to ask a question regarding. Can you hear me properly?
I can.
Oh, yeah, I think as a person who's not quite versed in the auditing space, I think I just want to ask a basic question where the public sector is involved. That is, you talked about getting the public involved, and I think with data that you're just presenting on the projector now, wouldn't it be beneficial to have these kind of monthly reports being publicized in, like, you know, things like SABC, or even having a YouTube channel for each and every municipality to sort of publish their own how this worked out? On top of that, I think we can even go further than that and break it down, as opposed to like saying these were 10 X companies and we don't even have to put their name. We can, you know, like sort of hash it, and they receive these tenders, they're working on this, it will be indicated by red.
Yeah.
And in that way we create a space where we have like a weather report for all the public funds every month, and someone is responsible. and I think that's also just speaking to also, like, I think getting, like, if you have the city involved, then you have more job creation, where, like, you know, also indicating these or like presenting these ideas, presenting how things went. And I just want to ask you, how possible is that, and what do you think about it?
Yeah. I think it's a brilliant idea. So here's the thing: the law specifically provides that every municipality must publish a quarterly performance report. That report goes to council. Once it's tabled in council, it's public, so you can actually access it. Have you ever seen your quarterly report for COJ? Okay. Maybe you must ask, Gabo. But let's not worry about the quarterly. Let's start with the annual one first. Maybe let's invite each other. Ne? Go to your municipality and read their annual performance report. Just read that and the audit report. Because the audit report will tell you whether or not you can rely on the performance report. And I'll give you a crib note. More than half of them you can't rely on. Okay? But the start is to say, hey man, I've looked at your performance report. It makes no sense. As a citizen, this worries me. If we can start to advocate for transparency and accountability using the instruments that are already there, we'll be able to get to where we need to. Start with the annual one, because that's the one the AG audits and gives you a view on. And then there's the quarterly. And then you can start to push back on the monthly. But that would be a dream. I love your thinking on this. I love it. I love it. Go ahead, sis.
I just wanted to ask, as somebody who does work, thank you, as someone who does work in the public sector, it seems my young counterparts in private are doing way better career-wise, benefits-wise. I mean, I'd like a petrol card. Yeah. But how do you manage to keep most of your employees, 60% you said, young people, how do you keep them motivated? How do you get them to stay?
Yeah.
I
think that's a brilliant question. So the team at the Office of the AG is 3,900 strong. 1,000 of them are chartered accountants whom, if you know the brand CASA and what it takes to get that brand, many of those people could go anywhere in the world. And many of them do, by the way. The people we produce in our office are sought after across the world. They go into private sector here, into private sector abroad, into public sector here, into public sector abroad. Because here's the trick. AGSA stands head and shoulders above many of its peers, private sector or public sector. And I say that without any fear of contradiction. If you look at the number of CAs that are being delivered every single year, AGSA has the biggest training scheme that's been accredited by SAICA, and we are able to deliver in the top 3 or 4 highest numbers of CAs. 2 years ago, 308 came through the Office of the AG. Majority black, majority female. The year after that, 258, I think it was, that comes out of the Office of the AG. When we did the 308, we were second, I think, to one of the big 4 firms. So people start to realize the quality that's here. Because remember, they write the same exams. Ne? There's no exam for private sector, public sector. And that's important. Because remember what we said. Look at Singapore. Okay? So it's important. It's important for me personally that every single one of our people, black as they are, women as they are, it's crucial for me that they be able to stand with pride wherever they are, in South Africa or abroad. Because people know the reality of what it is they know and what they can deliver. and they can build their careers elsewhere. Many of our people stay. A large number go into the public sector. They become the CFOs, they become the HODs, they become the internal auditors, they become the board chairs. That's important because we're not going to change the public sector unless the best go where? Many of them are also now being recruited into the private sector. We could moan and say, yeah, but we're developing talent and new people take it. No. We think it's a badge of honor because it says we're doing something right for our institution and for the people in it. The other thing is that across the world, my fellow AGs recruit from the office of the AG because not everyone has the same mandate like us. So when New Zealand started realizing about 5-6 years ago they're going to take on municipalities, they were not auditing them before, they came to recruit here because they're like, where's the place where people have experience of municipalities, you know? In fact, there's a joke in the office in New Zealand. There's like a whole floor, which is mostly South Africans, right? When the UK wants to audit the intelligence services, where do they go? The AGSA. So again, we could moan about, but our young people are leaving the country. My view, young people must have the ability to be mobile. Our job is to create an environment that makes it exciting for them to stay. And so that's what we invest in. We invest in building them up and giving them every reason to stay. And we know not everyone will stay. I dream about a world where, South Africa, where people move in and out of the public sector, into private sector and come back. For me, that's when I'll know that we're starting to create a public sector that's comparable with the private sector, where people feel like they can work anywhere. And when you have in your CV, I came from the office of the AG, I don't want you to be shy. Yabo? You must. Okay, there you go. Go ahead, sis.
Hi, I wanted to ask, so coming here has been interesting for me because I did not expect your talk to delve into what your department does necessarily. And in you speaking, I was just thinking that, like, I think the work you do, you're obviously interacting with politicians a lot. So how do you stop yourselves from becoming politically influenced?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. So remember I said to you that the 3,900 of us, 80% of them are professional auditors who belong to a professional body, mostly SAICA, with a code of conduct, with a code of ethics that is applicable across the world. So the AGSA has adopted the same code of ethics, and we invest heavily in making sure that our young people are aware of the dangers that exist in our society broadly, and a society that has for too long celebrated wrongdoing or celebrated the fruits, those who enjoy the fruits of wrongdoing, right? So we've got to push back on that and make sure our young people are conscious of the perils of losing their ethical posture. So we drive a lot of that. We also make sure, because they belong to a professional body, none of them want to lose their designation. There's no CA in the country, okay, very few, who want to ever lose their CA designation by doing funny things. I know sometimes people say, but CAs are corrupt. Actually, you know what? It's a very small number of rotten apples, very small. It's just unfortunately, rotten apples in a sack will spoil the rest. But the majority of our people are people who want to do good. And that's one of the things that has just mesmerized me in my 12 years at the office of the AG. And the majority of our people are people who also want to do well for themselves, which excites me, because if you want to do well for yourself, you're not about to lose your designation because you took a bribe. Yeah. The other thing, maybe the last thing. So we have international audit standards that we subscribe to. We have teams that audit so that no one person can ever give or deny a clean audit. It's not possible. No one person can make a finding go away. You'd have to engage the entire team. So whether it's a threat or bribe. It doesn't mean that these things don't happen. And it's an area we continually worry about. However, I want to give you a sense of why it's not a feature in our environment. Because we work in teams, we have these standards, we have these files, we also have delegations. For example, I don't audit. I don't sign off an audit file. Some people think, you're an AG, you're busy What did you say? Downgrading. I don't even do that. I don't even have that power. Why? Because I've delegated it to other people, professionals, whom I know have the skills, who have the authority to deal with the files properly, and I don't interfere. If there's a query, when people phone me, what's happening with this audit? I'm like, can I come back to you? I don't know. So-and-so, what are you doing, you know? And then, because they're professionals, they also don't want to lose their designation because they took pressure from me. They're not going to do so. And I also don't want to lose my designation. So we don't do that. So our environment is one that is highly professionalized. And I think it insulates us from the pressures of working in a society that tolerates wrongdoing. Yeah. Go ahead, sis.
On that very same point,
I just want to find out, Tsakani, what has been the biggest challenge as a technocrat that is still a state, in as much as you're independent, right? You are the Auditor General of South Africa, so you have some state, I would say, authority, thank you, to you. What has been, and especially as Auditor General, because you guys work directly with government, who we have lack of confidence in. Because what you present to us is a very exciting role and work that you guys do, but I'm sure it's not without its extreme challenges and difficulties. And what have been, in your leadership and your tenure, the ones that you've had to shield your employees from, and even sometimes yourself? As a technocrat, because we know there's not much appreciation for that currently.
Yeah. So, a couple of things. One of the really good things about our country is that our institution is so well respected, even by the politicians that you guys are so jaded by. There are many politicians who actually protect us, who support us, who engage us in a way that's productive. So, unfortunately, our experience is that there's great inefficiency, and then often we will link it to corrupt inclinations and tendencies. And that sometimes that's not the issue. It's a competence issue. But unless we engage as AGSA in a proper assessment of what's really going on here, and unless we invest in relationships where people can actually talk to us about what they are confronting, we won't make that impact. So what we do, so I'm going to answer your question in a roundabout way. Part of this strategy is also to say to our staff, who are South Africans, who experience what you and I do, who are worried just as you and I are, to say to them, you too can make a difference. Why don't you go and sit down with that creator's clerk that's got a disclaimer? Help them understand what it is they must do differently, how to maintain their records so that next year you deal with a disclaimer. It might sound like, hi, but why are you engaging someone on their core job? Well, if they don't know how to do it and you know, surely it's a conversation and you show them. One of the most inspirational stories that I'll probably remember for the rest of the year, from one of my team members about 3 weeks ago, we were debriefing on a particular audit. And they were telling me about what they are doing, because remember, I don't do the work myself. So I was saying, help me understand what happened with this audit. They said, no. What we did was we went to this particular clinic, this health facility, because they audit health. Remind, these are auditors, ne? He says, no. We went and we saw that their records management is a problem. And we kept asking why. And it was easy to issue a finding, but we tried to understand why. Then they realized, no, man, you see the nurse, she's alone and she's so busy attending to patients that she doesn't have the time to note the ins and outs of her pharmaceuticals. So the medicines she's handing out, she's not recording. So at the end of the month or the week, she can't reconcile. So we sat down with her and we showed her, no. What you do is every time you dispense Panado, just write it down. Next time, write it down. And then at the end of the day, give yourself 5 minutes just to note what you dispense for the day. Make sure you do it every day. And then make sure you do it every week. And then when you do it at the end of the month, you'll be able to cope. Because all of us know, if you neglect to do the basics every single day, it's going to catch up with you. And that's what our team members do. They engage in the work in a way that says, let's suspend our judgment of people. And remember, we're dealing with human beings at the end of the day. And let's not assume that they are corrupt, because that nurse is not corrupt. She's also not incompetent. But it's easy to make that judgment call from a distance. You got to be proximate. So what we've invested in is proximity to where the problem is, instead of staying superficially with the things that worry us. I hope that helps you. Thank you.
And on behalf of the foundation and the institution, we'd just like to give you a token of thanks for your efforts and time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Oh, can I just quickly introduce her? Lindiwe, please rise. This Lindiwe is one of our executives. She's the Chief People Officer, Lindiwe Miyambu. She's a member of our executive committee. She is, as I said, Chief People Officer. So you understand what that means, né? So she's the person who understands the area more than me. So I did not say Nasi Spani. I just said I'll introduce you to people who have power. Okay, thanks.